Welcome back, everyone. This is our second presentation for today. And we're so happy to have Miss Sophia Johnson. She'll be speaking to us on demand and supply of money. And for the alphaites out there, Miss Johnson is from the Convent of Mercy Academy. And I was told to say this particular way. So, without any further ado, I know we start a little late. Sit back, relax, and remember our house rules. We have muted everyone in the chat. But if you have questions, you can just type it in and we'll see it. And Ms. Johnson has some questions for you. And if you know the answers, you can also type it in the chat and guess you might win a prize. And of course, our friends on YouTube, if you have not yet, like and subscribe to our Bank of Jamaica YouTube channel. Please hit subscribe. Enjoy your presentation.
Anyone? Repeat. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Sophia Johnson, and I'm delighted to be presenting to you today on the demand and supply of money. So our presentation today will take the following format. We first start by defining what is money. Then we move on to the functions of money, demand and supply, money supply, money creation, and we end by looking at money substitution. So what is money? Money may be described as anything that is widely accepted in payment for goods and services or in settling other business obligations. We know that money was not used in early history. They had what we call the barter system. Now, there are two types of money. We have what is called commodity money, and this is the earliest known form of money. Individuals agree to accept certain commodities for their goods and services based on the intrinsic value of that commodity to them. Items used by most individuals were salt, cattle, furs, tobacco, shells, precious stones, and arrowheads. Then we have what we call fiat money, also known as token-based. This is money that the government declares as legal tender, for example, notes and coins. It is accepted as payments because it is backed by the government who issues, and it is extremely difficult to counterfeit. Next, we move on to the functions of money. So money has four main functions in any economy. It is used as a medium of exchange, something that is generally accepted as a means of payment. So we know that money promotes economic efficiency by eliminating time spent in exchanging goods and services. That is the transaction cost. So before money, individuals would barter to obtain the goods and services they wanted. One would not be able to access as many goods and services without this very important function. So without money, what we have called the double coincidence of wants. So, for example, if I want a car, well, it wouldn't be a car in that time. If I want a piece of yam and you want a piece of potato, I would make sure that I have to have the potato to give to you in order for me to receive the yam. So what we have is the double coincidence of want. So as a store of value, money allows purchasing power to be carried from one period to the next. So as a store of value, money is worth something today, tomorrow, and 10 years from now. How good of a store of value money is depends on the price level. If inflation is high, then money loses value rapidly, and people become reluctant to hold their wealth in this form. Money is used as a unit of account. It provides common measure of the value of goods and services being compared. So money facilitates easy comparison of prices. Fourth, we have standard of deferred payment. So money allows payment for goods and services consumed today in a future time period. And this implies the role of money in borrowing and lending. Money taken as loan is repaid over time, and the payment is done with money. So now we move on to the demand for money, and we start what is money demand. So money demand refers to the willingness and the ability of households and firms to hold their wealth in the form of money as against other assets, that is their liquidity preference. Other assets could be stocks, bonds, or real estate. So money is the most liquid asset. Why would anyone or businesses or individuals hold money as opposed to invest in other less liquid assets such as stocks and bonds? We'll get into that. Now we move on to our liquidity preference. And this addresses why people prefer to hold money rather than any form of asset. And that is why there's a preference for liquidity. So Keyes identified three motives for holding money. First, we have for day-to-day transactions. So money balances are held to buy goods and services now. It is influenced by the price level and income. It is unlikely to be influenced by changes in the interest rate. Example, you're paying your bills, you're going grocery shopping, you're going to the market, etc. So you understand what I'm saying. As it relates to precautionary purposes, money balances for unexpected spending in the future, and this is influenced by the price level and income. It is unlikely to be influenced by changes in the interest rate. For instance, in a pandemic or a financial crisis, persons will want to hold money in the form of liquid assets, such as notes and coins. As it relates to speculative purposes about the future, that is the last point, surplus money balances, that is money not required for transaction or precautionary purposes, can be held as asset or to provide funds for borrowers. This is influenced by the income and changes in the interest rates. So there are three main variables that influence or determine the amount of money rational individuals and firms can hold. One, we have the interest rate, and the interest rate is the price of holding money, right? So the higher the interest rate, the lower the money demand. And the interest rate is negatively related to the money demand. So at higher interest rate, you're going to demand less, but that is an higher incentive to save because you will get higher return on your investment. In lower interest rate, you will demand more money. You wouldn't want to invest that money within a bank since the interest rate is low, and as such, persons spend more or you borrow more since it's more incentive to borrow to invest. Next, we look at income. As it is, higher income leads to higher demand. Higher output levels increase money demand since the level of economic activities, that is the number of transactions, increases. Output is positively related to the demand for money. And lastly, we look at the price level. Higher price level leads to higher money demand. Therefore, the nominal interest rate, therefore the nominal money demand, is a function of the interest rate that is negatively related to the money demand, the income, which is positively related, and the price level, which is positively related. So let's look at the demand curve. So the demand curve starts with the vertical axis of the interest rate, while the horizontal axis has the quantity of money, denoted as M. As I've mentioned before, the interest rate is the price for holding money, right? So the money demand curve is downward slope, as this indicates that the quantity of money that people are willing and able to hold increases as interest rate falls. So the money, if you move, so the interest rate and the quantity of money are changes, are movement, these are movements. So changes in the interest rate and money are movement along the demand curve. So a movement from R to R double star would lead to a movement along the demand curve. And the same goes for M to M double star. So the new intersection will be here. So a movement from R to R double star will have you demanding less money since the interest rate increases. So here, persons are willing to save more than holding money, since there is an incentive to save. But however, changes in all other factors result in a shift in the demand curve. So we're going to look at an example. So what factors would influence a shift in the demand curve? A shift in the demand curve occurs when there is a change in any non-price determinant of demand, resulting in a new demand curve. For example, your income level. So suppose that the economy is doing well and real GDP increases by 5%, and Aunt Mary, who's selling more butterbread this year than last year since the economy is doing well. So she's now able to hire more labor. She will need more money for that. And she would need to buy more equipment. And as such, she would need money for that. So you get the idea. The demand for money increases when economic activity increases. So higher economic output leads to higher income. The higher that income is, the more of their wealth people choose to hold as money. So this leads to an increase in the demand for money. Since households are earning higher and are earning a higher income and wish to consume more. And as such, we see where the demand curve moves from M star to M double star, given that it's a shift because income increases. Now we move on to money supply. So the money supply is the amount of money in the economy. It is a sum of notes and coins and deposits, and is generally measured by monetary aggregates, which reflects the degree of liquidity and accessibility to assets. So first, we have the narrowest form of money, known as M1. M1 includes only the most liquid assets. Higher numbers following M reflecting broad measures of money, such as M2, M3, M2 star. So M1 includes all forms of assets that are easily exchangeable as payments for goods and services. It consists of notes and coins in circulation, traveler's checks, demand deposits, and even current account of deposit liabilities of commercial bank held for transactional purposes. Then we move on to M2, also known as broad money. So M2 would include M1 plus slightly less liquid assets. So M2 includes all of N1 plus most liquid assets and a collection of some interest earning additional assets that are slightly less liquid but have a low cost of conversion to a liquid asset. These additional assets include our savings account, our time deposits, our certificate of deposits, foreign currency deposit, and repos. So continuing with the supply of money. So the supply of money measured by BOJ. So we have what we call the monetary base, and that is a currency issue plus the cash reserve and the current account. And that equals to all of this, including, so it's M2J, so it's M1, M2J, M2 star, which is the local currency deposits, notes and coins, plus foreign currency deposits. Now we look at our supply curve. So we see that on the vertical axis, we have our interest rate, and on the horizontal axis, we have the quantity of money. The supply curve is inelastic. That means it is vertical and it does not depend on interest rate. It depends entirely on decisions made by the central bank. Changes in the interest rate result in movement along the supply curve. So if you move from here to here, it's just a movement on the supply curve and not a shift. Now that leads us into monetary policy. So monetary policy may be described as the use of interest rates or controls on money supply by a central bank to influence the economy. The target of monetary policy may be the achievement of a desired level or rate of growth in real activity, the price level, the exchange rate, or the balance of payment. There are two types of monetary policy. First, we have expansionary monetary policy, also known as accommodative monetary policy. And this is a policy where the banks allow the money supply to increase to meet the demand. We have contractionary policy, and that is a type of policy that is intended to reduce the rate of monetary expansion to fight inflation. So these are some of the tools that the Bank of Jamaica uses in their monetary policy. So as it relates to monetary policy and extensionary monetary policy, we have a reduction in interest rate, we can reduce the reserve requirement, and there's expand open market operation. So when we expand open market operation, that's when we inject liquidity within the system. And as such, we buy GOJ security. Contractionary monetary policy, that's when we increase our interest rate, we increase the reserve requirement, and we issue our BOJ CD, or we mop up liquidity from the market. So we get into that in the next slide. So the Bank of Jamaica's monetary policy tool. So what we have, we call OMOs, that is open market operation, and that is the sales and purchases of government and BOJ security in the open market. So presently, BOJ's OMO include our overnight CD, our standing liquidity facility, SLF, our 14-day repo, and our 30-day CDs. Open market purchases, as I would have explained earlier, expand the monetary base and increases the money supply while reducing the interest rate. And the interest rate of the overnight CD, which is 0.5% presently, is used to signal the bank's desire for the direction of interest rates in the financial market. Next, we have the reserve requirement. And this is the minimum portion of deposit that financial institutions are required to keep or hold as deposits with the central bank. And this is a direct policy tool as it controls the amount of credit in the system immediately. Lower reserve ratio means less money held by banks, more in circulation. And last, we have what we call moral suasion. And this is a process whereby the Bank of Jamaica, through discussions, influences but does not force commercial banks to comply with its goals. Now we look at an example. So what if the central bank sells security, and that leads to a reduction in the money supply? So pictorially, we can look at it. So BOJ issues their CDs, the BOJ CD to the market, and it goes to financial institution. And as such, financial institution will now pay BOJ for this CD. So this is an absorptive measure by the Bank of Jamaica. So financial institution will give BOJ liquidity, right? So what we have here, we have the vertical axis with the interest rate, and as such, we have the horizontal axis with the quantity of money. Recall that any time that the supply is fixed or exogenous, right? So selling security will reduce the money supply, right? So the money supply will move from MS1 to MS2, and as such, the demand for money will be reduced, as well as the interest rate will increase. Next, we look at another example. What if the central bank sells foreign exchange, which also reduces the supply of money? So it's the same concept, right? So we see here where BOJ will sell these foreign exchange to financial institutions, primary dealers, etc., while they will in turn provide Jamaican dollar liquidity currency to the Bank of Jamaica. And what this will do, this will shift the money supply curve from MS1 to MS2, while this will cause the interest rate to increase. So we have a brain teaser here. So you can respond in the chat as it relates to this question. Suppose households decide to hold more of their money as currency and less in the form of deposit, of demand deposit. Determine the impact on money supply. So you can respond to the chat. So now we move on to money creation. So first we start with loans and reserves. So loans and reserves are two important assets of a commercial bank. The central bank requires all commercial banks to keep a fraction of the funds they hold on deposit as reserve. Excess reserve is the difference between a commercial bank's actual reserve and required reserves. A commercial bank continues to lend until it has no more excess reserve in order to generate income. So each loan creates money as the depositor's wealth is unchanged, but the recipient of the loan can purchase a good or service from a producer, which then becomes a producer's wealth. Therefore, the stock of money in an economy grows by the size of the loan. If the new holder of the funds deposit this income, then the process can be repeated, creating even more money. So this leads us to the money multiplier, right? So the money multiplier is the multiple by which deposits can increase for every dollar increase in reserve. And that is, the money multiplier is 1 over the reserve requirement. So change in the money supply is equal to the money multiplier times the change in the initial deposit. Therefore, an increase in the required reserve ratio, that is the amount of money that banks are required to hold, if that increases, this, because R here, double R, is the base, this would lead to a reduction in the money multiplier, which leads to a reduction in the money supply. So another question coming up, remember to reply in the chat. So the process of credit creation is central to any modern day banking. Show how a bank can create credit if it receives a cash deposit of 100,000 and the required reserve ratio is 20%. So remember to respond in the chat. Okay, seems we have a winner. All right, so we move on to question 2. Question 2, I will work through that with you. Okay? So the process of credit creation is central to any modern day banking. Show how a bank can create credit if it receives a cash deposit of $100 and the reserve required ratio is 10%, and what is the total amount of deposit created. So the answer to this, so we have Michelle going to Bank One, and she deposits $100. So when she deposits this $100 in Bank One, given that the reserve requirement is 10%, the bank will now hold 10% as reserve, while now the bank will have 90% to disburse as loan, right? Now Bank One disburse this loan to Kemar, right? Kemar, who goes to Bank Two, now deposit this loan that he received from Bank One, the loan from Bank One, to Bank Two, right? So Bank Two will now have $9 in their reserve and have $81 to disburse as loan. Shauna, who now received this loan from Bank Two, will now go to Bank Three and make a deposit of $81, right? So Bank Three, having received this $81 from Shauna, will now have $8.10 as reserve and will have $72.90 to disburse as loan. So you get the idea, right? So to calculate the change in deposit, as I've mentioned before, that is 1 over the required reserve ratio, and the required reserve is 10%, so that would be the change in deposit is 1 over the required reserve times the initial deposit, right? Where the reserve requirement is 0.1%, so the change in deposit is now 1 over the 0.1%, which is the reserve requirement, times $100. That means the total deposit from this $100 that Wealth has created was $1,000. And the total reserve is, given that the reserve requirement is 10%, is $100, and now the total loans within the economy is now $900. So does the central bank have absolute control of money supply or money demand? Why? The central bank can influence money demand by changing interest rates and managing inflation. It can control the money supply by changing the reserve requirement ratios of the banking sector, purchasing or selling of OMOs, securities, and the purchasing or selling of foreign currency. But there are limitations, as we know. So monetary policy is permissive. It provides the enabled environment for economic growth. But there are shocks. There are weather conditions, droughts and hurricane, and we're living in Jamaica, we know what that is. We have turmoil in international financial markets. So it is difficult to eliminate lags in monetary policy. There may be a weak transmission process via credit, and monetary policy may be weakened by fiscal indiscipline. But however, we see where that has been absent in recent years. So now we close by looking at currency substitution. So changes in the relative price of a domestic currency in terms of a foreign currency, that is their exchange rate, will affect the demand for a currency. So currency substitution is when a country uses a foreign currency in lieu or in addition to their domestic currency, primarily due to instability of that foreign currency. So the reason for currency substitution, we have lack of confidence in macroeconomic fundamentals of the economy due to inflation, significant exchange rate depreciation, portfolio decisions, and period of uncertainty. For example, pandemic or financial crisis. So currency substitution is also referred to as dollarization. And this ratio is total foreign currency deposit in Jamaican dollars. So that is the equivalent, so that is the Jamaican dollar equivalent of foreign currency over total local currency deposits, right? So the graph to the right will illustrate Jamaica's total dollarization ratio as at March, but what we're seeing that our dollarization normally lies between 40 to 45 within this region, and as at March, the ratio was 40.8%, and what that means that 40.8% of our total deposit is in foreign currency. And what affects this ratio? We know that we have a floating exchange rate system, so if the currency appreciates, we'll have a lower ratio despite having an increase in the deposit, or if the currency depreciates, we'll have an increase in the ratio, given that the numerator will now be higher. So that brings me to the end of the presentation, and we'll have a quick test. Just remember to respond in the chat, right? So first question we have, what are some examples of commodity money? First question, what are some examples of commodity money? 2, what are the functions of money? 3, does higher money growth cause inflation? Discuss. It doesn't have to be long. And last, what are the tools of monetary policy and how does the central bank use them to control money supply? Thank you.